How are you doing, all you guitar nerds out there? Today on the bench we have this beautiful National Sportsman Model 1201. The owner's complaint is the amp is very noisy and the volume drops after the amp warms up. Have an educated guess what the problem is. Yes, you're right, this amp is old. So let's see what we can do. It was a quite painful journey for me, but it might be fun for you. So if you're interested in this repair job, stick around. But as usual, before we get started, let's have a quick overview. Well, the amp is overall in pretty good shape despite the age of this unit. We still have the grumpy looking bird flocked on the grill cloth, and I hope the look this bird gives me is not an ominous sign when it comes to the issues. Well, it's scary. Here we can see the panel with one microphone and 3 instrument inputs. The microphone channel has an independent volume pot. There's a second volume knob for the 3 instrument inputs. We have a bass, a treble control, which is unusual for old Valcos. I've never seen that before. Most of the time they have only one tone pot and that's it. But pretty standard, pilot light, fuse holder, on and off switch. Alright, let's crack this beauty open and see what we find inside. Well, opening it up is not that easy. Look at the screw heads. No screwdriver will fit in here. And we have the same thing on the top side. Okay. Well, let's turn it around and open the back door. That might be a good idea. Oh, no back door at all. Finally, the bottom side has some screws, and that's the only way to get in here. This repair video will make one fact very clear. In old amps like this, one problem can lead to the other. As soon as the amp is back to working conditions, issues can pop up that were hiding under more obvious failures. And that's the case here. You will see that later. All right. I think this is the last screw, and then we can take a look inside. Ta-da! Here we go. Oh, look, I'm not the first one in here. You can see the blue can capacitor shine down there. A real eye catcher, isn't it? Well, the chassis is a very simple banded metal sheet, and we can see 2 8-inch speakers, and the output transformer is piggybacked on the left one. Well, the speakers are beautiful Jansen Alicos, but the output transformer is a brand I've never seen before. It's a Stancor, Chicago Standard Transformer Corporation. And these fellows produced, believe it or not, the world's toughest transformers. But maybe it's true, you know, these transformers still do their job after decades. But how old is this Sportsman actually? Well, the speaker code helps a lot. It's a 220 Jansen, and the date code is 013. That means it was produced in the 13th week of 1950. Another indicator is the little brass tag that you will find on every Valco amp and instrument. The prefix V points to the late 40s and early 50s, and the serial number in accordance with the speaker code tells us it was made in 1951. And imagine when this amplifier was made, there was no Stratocaster, no Gibson Les Paul, no ES, SG whatsoever. And the Telecaster was barely on the scene in such a small amount of numbers that only a few people knew about it. Unbelievable, isn't it? So we can assume that this amp wasn't designed for solid body electric guitars at all. Oh, let's talk about design. To get access to the nuts, to disassemble the chassis, I designed this fantastic tool, probably the longest tool in mankind's history. Well, finally I got the chassis out and on the bench, and the first inspection shows the previous tech left the old wax and paper and oil capacitors in place. He changed only one, and that makes absolutely no sense, and I will show you why later in this video. As you can see, he did something, but these old capacitors are looking nasty. Look at this one. Well, nobody can expect that these old jokers do their job after 71 years. They have to go. Well, here you can see a dropping resistor still sitting on top of a 71-year-old can capacitor, and that's another no-no. So let's go ahead. First thing first, let's change the old capacitors. And now I will show you why it's so important to get rid of old capacitors. Here's my fantastic diode and condenser tester. I bought it on eBay for almost nothing. On this scale we can read the resistance of a capacitor in mega ohm. And in case there is a resistance, the cap is leaky. Even a very high resistance allows DC to flow. And we all know that the purpose of a capacitor is to block DC voltage. Oh, look. Here's a warranty card. International. 1 year only. Well, This thing was made in 1979. Okay, no warranty anymore. Well, this device puts 300 volts of DC across a capacitor, and we can also monitor the voltage on the multimeter. You see here 300 volts. This is a brand new capacitor, and we see that the needle stays in the green section of the scale, so there's no leakage. And now let's do the same thing with a 71-year-old blocking capacitor. Here we have a significant voltage drop and a resistance of around 1 meg. A bad boy that increases hum and will disturb a good tube operation, or in the worst case, that will destroy the tube. Well, is it dangerous to fiddle around with 300 volt on the probes? Yes, it is, but I'm too dumb to be afraid. Time to pay attention to the tubes. Let's start with the 6SC7. This one is the phase inverter tube in our Sportsmann. It's a tungsol marked with JAM, and this label means that it's military specification. That's the highest standard possible. Let's set up the tester. I can find all these informations on the chart that came with the unit. Okay, this octo preamp tube is type number 3. We have 6.3 volts on the heater, 33 as the load, and then we set the levers to choose the pin layout. Okay, no shorts, and it's still working. Maybe a little bit weak, but it's still doing the job on either side of the triode. Here we have the rectifier tube, 5Y3, and as you can see, it is working in good conditions. Let's check the other half of the diode. And again, looks good. And finally we have the 6SL7 preamp tube, a double triode made by RCA. Okay, let's set the levers, switch it on and give it a second to warm up. No shorts. And the first triode is testing good, and so do the second triode and the power tubes to 6V6s. But remember the look that the grumpy bird gave me? That promised more trouble and pain. And yes, the next issue was already standing in line. Listen to that buzz that appeared only in the microphone channel, and only when I turned the volume control of the microphone channel halfway up. When I turned it to full volume, the buzz was gone. A pretty strange issue. I used my scope to trace out where the hum was injected. Here it comes, a nasty distortion. And it's right at the input, at the grid of the 6SL7 To get rid of that buzz, I tried different solutions like a capacitor between grid and volume pot, a grid stop resistor, a new volume pot, and new preamp tubes, but nothing solved the problem. So I was starting to despair. Finally, I decided to tie in the volume pot of the microphone channel after the first gain stage at the plate. The way Fender did it in smaller amps like the Princeton Brown Phase, for instance. And it works like this. The signal leaves the plate of the first triode. A coupling cap blocks the DC voltage at the plate, and the signal runs through the volume pot to the next stage. The result, no buzz at all. But now let's take a look at the finished restoration. Here's a grid block resistor added to the microphone input. Here we have the reassembled volume control connected to the plate of the first triode. We have shielded cables in every signal path. We have two new resistors, the old ones were out of spec, and of course new block-in capacitors and new tone capacitors. Here we have new filter capacitors. The blue cap can is gone because it looks nasty. A new dropping resistor at the rectifier tube. The old one looked pretty toasted. The previous tech already did a couple of things, like new bypass capacitors at the input tube, new grounded input jacks, a 3-prong cord, and a power switch, a new one. He did a lot of things except bringing this amp back to working conditions. But now everything seems to be fine. So far so good, but the next issue is standing in line. As I mentioned before, one problem leads to the other. One of the beautiful Jansen Alnicos is blown. You can hear the rubbing voice coil. This one is alright. This one is gone. The owner decided to go for two Jupiters 8-inch speakers. They look pretty good. They sound pretty good. So here you can see them already installed at the speaker baffle. Let's listen to the noise floor after everything is done. I think that is more than acceptable. The noise is really quite nothing. Even with the whole circuit exposed to the shop light. Just for the giggles, let's check the bias. The cathode resistor is 200 ohms spot on. We have a voltage drop across the resistor of 14.7 volts and a plate to cathode voltage of 242.7 volts. That's a plate dissipation of 8.85 watts. These tubes run pretty cold when we consider that they are good for 12 watts of plate dissipation in a cathode bias push-pull circuit. But will a cold biased amp like this sound good? Before we answer that question, let's staple in the little envelope with a spare fuse. A little detail that adds some charm to these old Valco amps. By the way, let's talk about the tone control on this amp. It's not very effective, but these controls bleed a lot of signal to ground, and that makes them work like a master volume. And that gives you a nice opportunity to shape the sound. Alright, ready for the sound samples, and I have to confess, this is one of a few amplifiers that make me close my eyes immediately while I'm playing, because this old guy sounds fantastic. It's warm, it's beefy, it sounds harmonic. I hope you agree. Listen to that.